Hello, everyone. Welcome to our workshop today on an exciting new development of the Custom Action Designer. Got a few more folks coming online. Looks like we have a number of repeat customers who've been here, kind of seeing what this is all, not this specifically, but what these workshops are all about. A few new names on here, a lot of new names actually. So I think there's a lot of people interested in what we're showing today, so that's great. Great to see that. I hope everyone can see my screen and hear me okay. And let me know if you can't see the screen or can't hear me. Well, I guess just raise your hand if you're not getting any audio. But we're just kind of waiting here for a few more minutes. Got a few more people popping on before I get into the meat of it. But what we're going to get started with here, a couple housekeeping items. If you've been here before, you've heard me say this, but always bears repeating. There is a questions box, and I just noticed there's also a chat feature in the GoToWebinar panel. So either one of those options you could use to ask a question at any point in time. I use the questions box for the questions at any point in time. And we'll get to that question either in the course of the workshop or we'll answer it after the fact. We also have Scott Restivo from Croquet Software on here to help answer any questions you have as we go along. He can also chime in if there's any good questions to ask as we go along and go from there. So it looks like we've got a good chunk of the populace on the call now, so that's excellent. Again, hope everyone's having a great day for anyone who just joined. And again, we're going to talk about this new Custom Action Designer. So my name is James Restivo from Croquet Software. Been here almost 9 years, going on 9 years now. Helped oversee the development of NITRO Studio itself and the various iterations and just how far it's come from the initial inception to what we have now is just incredible. And you guys are just getting into it. It's a great time to be taking a look at it. So what we're going to do today, I'm going to walk through kind of setting up a couple different simple custom actions. Then we're going to take a look at a more complicated custom action. And we're going to talk mainly about the features in the new Custom Action Designer that we just released very recently, within the last month. I think it was beginning of August we got it out there. And it's going to be in version 2.0 and above. So if you are on premises, there are updated packages for getting the Custom Action Designer in place. If you don't have it yet, reach out to us and we can get you that updated package for the on-premises world. If you're online, you should be able to go to your NITRO Studio admin page and update to the latest version, and then you'll see the Custom Action Designer. But it's such a big, release for us, a new feature for us that we increased the version of NITRO to 2.0. So previously it was 1. whatever. Now it's 2.0, and will continue to be 2.0 until our next big release. And so that's what we're looking at today, is this Custom Action Designer interface. And let's just go ahead and get into it. Right, a few minutes in, I think we got everyone on who's going to be joining. So this session will be recorded and shared with you afterwards. So if anyone misses the call, you'll be able to review this both in your email and on our website. We'll have this workshop available. So without further ado, let's go ahead and get right into it. I'm not big on PowerPoints, any of that kind of stuff. I like to just get into the nitty-gritty of what we're showing here. So can I walk through the structure of what we're looking at here? It's going to be a request list. I've got this request list I've created. You should see that on the screen right now. And I've created a few other connecting lists just to kind of show some functionality here. So we're going to be doing a custom action on this list, and you'll see what that looks like. So to get to the Custom Action Designer, it's the same way as you've been getting to custom actions all along. So there's a few places you can do that. You can do it from the list ribbon. You can see it right here in the modern list view, it's right there. In the classic list view, you'll see it up in the list ribbon as well. And you'll just click on that and get right into it. So if you hit custom actions, it's going to open this custom actions screen, and you're going to see kind of a new layout here for getting into the custom actions. So instead of that other grid view you had previously, you got this new layout here, where you're actually going to see custom actions designed for multiple lists across the site. In the current design, or the 1.0 design, I should say, it had the custom actions just for the current list you were working on. In this case, we're actually going to be able to see custom actions across all the lists in the site. So this is one of the first kind of new feature to take a look at is that you'll be able to see how many custom actions you've created in your site and kind of see where they live and tag into it. And as you build out more complex workflows, it's important to get that information. So you see, okay, did I create that send mail action over on this list, or did I create on that list? And you can kind of see that here. Now, the next thing you're going to notice is when you hit the new custom action button over here on the right-hand side, you're going to get this dialog box, ask you what list to create it on and what experience you want to use. So if you want to keep using the legacy custom action designer, that's fine. You can go ahead and do that. But this, we're going to show the designer piece, so we're going to go ahead and go to this request list, and we're going to create a new custom action in the designer mode. So let me go ahead and pop that open. And you're going to see this layout here. So it's going to be a little different than what you've had before. And it's got the more of the workflow design BPMN kind of notation going on. But I'll kind of walk you through where you can get to the things you're familiar with and what also is new in here as well. So first thing you'll notice, you don't have a place to name your custom action. Well, that's going to be done through the settings. So in the current, the 1.0 version, you'd have a box at the top of your screen where you can put the name in and decide a few other things about that custom action. You still have that, but it's in the settings button right here. So we pop that open, we can give it a name. I'm just going to do a real simple one, like send email to requester. And so just do a real simple one. We're going to you have all the settings you had before, where to show the custom action. And then you'll see down below, you also have the settings for what happens when the custom action is completed. So you have those two different options that are there in the 1.0 design, but they're also now here in the 2.0 design, but in the settings page itself. Now you're also going to have the conditions option, which is there in the 1.0 version. And that's just broken out into its own piece. And this is going to let you decide when to, what conditions need to be in place for running this action. I'm going to do a quick condition here to say that, status should equal not started for that. And we'll go, so that'll become important in a little bit, and I'll show you what that looks like. So now you can get into the actual design. So you can set those settings and conditions before or after, either way. Before you save it, you'll have to put in a title for your custom action. But now let's get into the actual design of it. And you'll notice you have over here on the left-hand side, 3 different dropdowns. Flowchart controls, which aren't really driving the design of the action, but they kind of help move things around, like the hand tool helps you move things around. You can select multiple things. We'll talk more about that stuff. You see we have these events and controls. And one thing to note for the custom actions specifically is that there's really only going to be one start point. It's not going to recognize multiple start points. There really is only one start point. However, there could be multiple endpoints. And I'll show you what that looks like. And then the new feature here is a gateway. So previously in the 1.0 version, you could go and create conditions on each action itself. In this case, in the designer, you're going to want to do a gateway to run the action, and that's going to be what drives where it goes. So I'll show you where that can actually take you down different paths within the workflow, and then it can even bring you to different endpoints within the workflow. So again, one start point, multiple endpoints are possible, and as they get more complex, you'll see why that's important. So we'll just do a real simple one here with the actions. You'll see here's all the actions you have today in the 1.0 version, or had in the 1.0 version. They're still there, and they're in this in this listing here. So you go through, and there's a couple ways you can add these items, these actions into your designer. And one way to do it is just drag and drop, and we're going to do a send mail action. So we can do drag and drop, and you'll see once you get that line in place, you see a little blue line that pops up. The arrows become dotted, the kind of dotted line around the arrow. Pop it on. Now it becomes part of that flow. So start, flow, do something, end. So real simple, send an email, and then when you open this one up, this is going to be familiar to you. In the current design, you have the same settings. So we didn't change around the settings pages for each of these types of actions. They're going to be what you're recognizing today. So we get this send email to requester from a no reply, and into the requester. I was going to do a real kind of simple setup here. Column requester. Okay. So send to the requester. You could create a mail template and then hit OK. And then once you have that set up, that's it. That's a real simple workflow. And this is what it would look like. But now let's say you want to add in some other things. Like, okay, we want to send an email to the requester, and you can see you can kind of drag and drop these things, or drag and move these things around. You can move around the whole design screen as well if you need to. But let's say we want to drag and drop something else on there. We want to add a list item, like an approval task, for instance. Now I can do that. Again, you're going to get the same screen you had before. Add approval task, and we're going to get that from added to some list, and then we can set our columns. In this case, I'm just going to do a couple simple things there. Hit OK. Now you've got another item, and then we're going to add in another item here. Maybe update the status and pop in there. Now you notice once you drag the action onto your screen, you're going to have this little red configuration warning here, basically saying nothing's been configured for this action. And you'll also see that when we go to save this, it's highlighting the item in pink or red to let you know something's wrong with that action. We can't save it because the settings aren't completed. Save it, it's not going to let me do it. So we have to go and do some configuration here to get this to work. So we just do something like update status, and we're just going to update that status to like in progress. Like so. Now you see that red button goes away, and now I can save it, and it'll save the settings for that action. So that's another big new feature here, is that you can save as you go. So similar to Nitro Forms, you can configure your form, you can save your form, but you don't have to publish it just yet. So you can do that, you can save it, and then come back into it and make additional adjustments before you publish it. So that's another really big new thing that you can do. Previously in the 1.0 version, you create your custom action and then you hit OK, and that saves it and creates it and adds it to the list and becomes a button available. Now, other ways you could hide it, you could put some invalid conditions around it or whatnot, but this gives you a way to actually fully design it before you even release it. So once we get that saved, you'll notice that in addition to the action not being configured, if we remove one of these nodes here, one of these arrows, all of them become with an error. And that is going to cause to not be able to save it again. We'll hit save, and you'll see everything's highlighted because we're not completing the connection. Something's wrong with this flow. We're not completing the connection, and you have to go and do that. So now I've been dragging and dropping from the left-hand side, but if you click on any one of these actions, you'll see you have this whole panel of items coming over here on the right. And these icons correspond to the actions over here on the left. And then also at the bottom, you have an option to delete your action. You can get rid of it. And then you have the option to use this, the gateway connector or node connector, and it's going to give you that arrow to put onto your form. Now let's take this a little further, right? Okay, so now we've got kind of a simple action. Start it. Basically, probably when the item gets added, we can embed this into a submit action on the Nitro form and send an email to the requester, create an approval task, and update the status. But one thing I want to point out on our request list over here, and if I click on a new one, you'll see this. We have internal requesters and external requesters for this particular type of request. So maybe they're requesting information, requesting supplies, whatever it might be. But you have someone who's coming in from the internal world and someone who might be coming in from the external world with different information. So in this scenario, what we want to do is get the approver based on either the department or the requester's company. So you see I have a departments list, which has an approver field. I have a company list, which has an approver field. And I need to determine which one of those lists to get the information from. And we can do that by, we have a flag, now we have this flag on here on our form to say it's an internal requester or an external requester. Now, if I come back here, you'll see I have a couple of those already created. We have an external request for information from Contoso. We have a request for services from Adventure Work Cycles. So a couple different types of requests, and these are going to have different approvers based on who, whether it's an internal or external request. So how do we do that in our custom action? Well, in the 1.0 world, we could add conditions to multiple query list actions, but what we have here is this gateway option. And the gateway option is what's going to let you decide which way does this go? Which way does this workflow actually move? Which node does it go down? So we have this one here, it's got an error, the warning because I need something else to happen here. And I'm going to do a couple different query list actions here. So I'm going to take my query list. And one thing you'll know is that you can drag and drop, or I like to call it drag and drop or click and plop. So I can click on it and plop it, or I can drag it over and drop it, either way. So what I'm going to do is actually remove this node here. I'm going to use I can actually use my lasso control because I want to move all this stuff down. I'm going to take this lasso control over here, highlight everything, move it down, and then I can start kind of moving things around. So now the gateway control, it has two nodes. It has to have two ways to go out from the system. So we can take our gateway and we can go bring one side over here. We have this label and we can move that around. Then we have our gateway that goes over here. And we have this label, again, we can move it around. We can kind of play around with what this arrow looks like, something like that. And then if I kind of don't like it, the curve there or the angle, I can just remove it, delete it, and re-add it. So now I get rid of that angle. So it kind of depends, you can kind of play around with that. And you can change these label conditions. So in this case, I want to say, we're going to go in this direction if it's an internal requester. And I'm going to go this direction if it's an external requester. And so now you can see you got those two different nodes in two different directions that could potentially go down. And when we go into the gateway itself, this is where you create your condition. So you have the name of this, check request or type, and then we're going to add in our condition, and that condition can be, it could go one of two ways. It could be check to see if it's internal or check to see if it's external. But essentially what we're going to do is go to request, I believe it's request type. There it is. And we're going to say it equals internal. So now this gateway node is going to check to see, does request type equal internal? If it does, which means the conditions are matched, we're going to go down the internal requester route. If it means the conditions are not matched, we're going to go down the external requester route. So a couple different ways you can go. Now, the question is probably going to come up, how do you do this for multiple conditions? Okay, you want to check that one condition, then you want to check another condition. Well, that's easy enough to do. We can move this guy over a little bit, maybe move the label to the left, give us a little space, and add in another gateway. So now we can do another check over here. So, okay, check one was passed, it's external requester and not internal, or at least it's not internal requester. Now we can do another check and decide, okay, where is this one going to go? And you see it's going to give me an error message that I need to outgoing connection. So I would have to create another thing. I could just for simplicity's sake, I can go do that. Just create connection, then I can configure that connector there, or that gateway there. Now, if I don't want the gateway, all these actions you'll see have the remove option. We can get rid of it, and then I can create this connection over to my query list and just change my label back to external requester, and just double check and make sure that it's got the right settings. And I have to click off of it. So click off that. Now I come back in, external requester. So now I've got my two nodes. Now, another thing we were going to want to do here is check to see if there is an approver or not. So one of the things we're going to do here for this particular example is create a variable. And I'm going to create a quick variable here for approver. And I'm going to give it a default value of 0, and I'll show you why in a minute. We're going to want to do that. So we do a query list over here to say this query list, we're going to do, get internal approver. And we're going to get one item, and we're going to get it from our departments list. So this is an internal person. We're getting it from a departments list. And then we're actually going to take we're going to first connect those up. I'm going to create this connection here where the title of the departments list is going to equal that requester department. So do something like this, department. And I'm going to go to my list settings to get the internal name for that requester department. Make sure I get the right one. So whenever you're doing these placeholders, make sure you have the display name and the internal name, and you can get the internal name from the URL at the top of the page. So come back to my custom action. Get my piping in there, Control V, close bracket, %%. That's my placeholder. So the requester department on my request list needs to match up with the title and the department list, and I'm going to get the approver and map that into my approver variable. Again, I can go and check this. I know from setting this up, I know that this is the internal and display names. So I can go ahead and do that, hit OK. So now I've got the check. I've created this gateway to go over here to internal requester to get the internal approver based on the department chosen in the list. So then I can do the same thing over here on this side, external, or get external approver. And then I'm going to get that information from the company list, because now we're looking at external companies. We've got that related lookup column. If you go back to our request list, you'll see that over here, that if I open up a new one, you'll see that company is a lookup. So external, company is a lookup field, and I have my approvers defined over there. So go get that information. Again, I'll map it into my variable, and I know it's the same name as the departments list as it is on the company list. So you do that, hit OK. Now, you can see based on which selection, go down 2 different nodes and go 2 different directions down this. So then what I can do is make another gateway over here, and I can actually have connect back into this gateway. And I can move my arrows around to make it look better, so I know that give better visualization to it. So they're both going to come over here. Both these are going to check to see if that approver value was filled out. If it wasn't filled out, then it might go a different route. So I'm actually going to do that. So in one scenario, we'll do a second end node over here. Now let me move my additional actions here. Get them over to the side. So one scenario, we can go this way, and the other scenario, we can come over here to this line of options. So it can be something like this: approver found and approver not found. So then I'll come into my here, so check if approver found. And we're going to want to use the advanced condition in this case and check to see if the that approver variable was filled out or not. So approver value 0. Okay, so I set that value of that initial variable to be 0. So I'm checking to see, is it still 0? Let me see, we do approver. If it's still 0, it means the approver was not found, which is what this is going to update to. But if it is not 0, it means the conditions are not matched. It's going to go down to the approver found route. So let me click off that, make sure I get my approver not found. There it is. Okay, it updated automatically. So kind of a little more advanced, but is a way to do it and kind of see how things are going. So it's like, okay, we're going to check to see if we have an external requester or an internal requester. We're going to do another check to see, was that approver variable updated or not? And if not, we're just going to end it, or we can send a different mail to requester. We could take this send mail action, pop it on there, move things around, kind of make it look a little better, and then create another send mail function to go say, hey, the approver wasn't found, you have to resubmit your request, or whatever the case may be. So you can go one direction over here and a different direction over here if the approver is found, based on your gateway. So that's the big thing with the gateway, is it lets you kind of drive which direction your flow goes, You can go do a loop and come back and go to that go to a gateway or a new gateway and maybe do another check. So there's a few different ways you can go with that with the gateways. And then you can see you could also put these different end nodes on here as you go along. So that's the use of the gateways, and that's the use of putting having different end nodes here. So it gives you a lot more flexibility and a capability in how you design out your flow, how you design out your conditions, and so it gives you the visualization of what your flow is going to look like. Now, the other thing we can take a look at here is our debugger. So in the previous version, there was a trace execution. You still have that option. It's going to kind of do the same thing. But with this design, you can actually see, where is my flow going? Which way is it taking? And what we can do with the debugger, well, first of all, I'm going to get an error because I know I will. I hit debug, it's going to tell me, well, there's something wrong here. You haven't configured that send mail action yet. Well, I'm going to go ahead and delete that. I'm not going to worry about it right now. So for now, I'm going to hit my debugger, and I'm going to now see which way it goes. So if I come back to my request list, I can see which one I need to take a look at. And one thing to note, one thing we're going to put a message on here to note is that when you're running the debugger, it's going to run this stuff in real time. So it's actually going to make updates to your item. So you'll want to make sure that you're putting in putting in a test item or doing a test function, test run, so that way you can test it out. So in this case, what we're going to do, we're going to go back to our workflow here. We can see we have this first one. Let me take this first one here and just see what this debugger does. So request for supplies, hit OK. Now you see this debugger, it kind of shows you where you are in the process. It's going to highlight it green. Well, we're right at the start of it, showing who's logged in, how we're doing it, and then we hit continue. Now it brings up some other information and validating the permissions. Well, we allowed this for everyone in our conditions builder. We allowed this to run for everyone, so that's okay. Now it's going to run through and check those conditions that we set up at the beginning of our workflow and the conditions button at the top. And if the conditions button is not matched, it's going to exit out. And that's what happened here, because the column over here is checking to make sure that this is in a not started status. Right now it's in an in progress status. And that's why we errored out over here and said, execution only gives me an option to close it out, and that's that. So you can see it worked properly. It checked my conditions and did not run the action. Now we can come back in here and try this for a different item. And we can see we have this item here for the external customer, and it's in progress, not started, so I should be able to get going with it. And it's a request for information. So I'm going to go ahead and hit that. Again, we check our conditions, validating the action conditions themselves, and we can see that the result was true here. So we got the result is true. Now we're going to run the action, and then it's going to show which way you're going down. So it checks the gateway, and now you can see we're highlighted over here on the external requester side. So that means we have a external requester. That's true. That's what we had over here. And so that's why it's choosing that path. Now I can also check, I know I have an approver for Contoso, so it should go down the path over here for approver being found. Let's bear that out in reality. Let's see. So it's going to get the information. It's going to look up the column value. It's going to query the items. You can see it returned a value. And now it's going to run the check if approver is found. It said that, yep, approver was found. Now we're going down this node. We can move this guy around up here and keep following it down. And it's going to, prepare, send an email, which we could edit the email if we wanted to. Then it's going to give me a red error because I just exited out of that. But you can see it's going down, which path it's going down, how it's going down, and then go from there. So if I close out of this, either by hitting the X or the close, I can debug my internal requester one, just make sure it's working properly. Go to request for services, hit OK, and follow the same logic. Checks the condition, it's not started, we're good to go. Now you can see it's gone down the internal requester route, hit OK, keep going, and check. Now it's going to check if the approver is found. and did find an improver on that one, so it's going that route instead, or it's going down this route. So you can see it's all working properly, working the way it should, and that's the way we debug it. So if something doesn't work right, or you're like, oh, you know what, improver's not found, should actually do something else, well, you can just come back in here and again, either drag and drop or click and plop, click, plop, and put it in there. And see how it automatically tags in and connects into that flow. So, I mean, you can see in this scenario, and kind of in this use case, instead of going down this route, we could even go completely different routes. If we wanted a whole different process for the external requesters, we could do that. We could do, you know, we can have a gateway check over here, make sure it got the approver and go down different routes that way. Same thing over here, and just completely separate it out. So we could take away these lines here and say, you know what, we don't need to do that check. We're just always going to go ahead and, you know, let's say add approval task. So we can take that off. Maybe take this one off. We can move this guy, take off the connections, move this guy over here for this one. And on this side, maybe we're not creating an approval task, so we could do it over here. Otherwise, we could, you know, we can't, we don't yet have a way to copy and paste these if they're doing the same thing. So we'd have to either tag these back into the same, you know, basically into the same flow, same action. We can tag both these into this one, or create two different actions that would kind of do the same thing. And then, you know, you can see on this, if you want to do a totally different route, if it's an internal requester, you can do that. And then you can do a wholly different route. If it's an external requester, we can do it like so. Here, gateway connector, connect to our gateway. So you can see you can move things around, make them tighten them up. If you go off the screen, if you get a really big workflow, you can always drag this around and see where you're at. You can also use Control plus and Control minus to increase or decrease the size. So if it gets really big and you want to see more of it, you can hit the Control minus and see more, or you can hit Control plus to get, you know, kind of zoom in on a certain area. All right, so that kind of shows the different routes, what the gateway does, how you can take different nodes. You can have as many gateways in there as you want. There's no limit. I don't think there's any realistic limit. There's no real limit on the number of actions, though realistically, how, you know, you might want to make sure you don't have too many actions in there just because it might get unwieldy to manage from a management perspective. But from a technical perspective, I don't think there's any limit on how many actions you can put in here. Okay, so then a few other features that I can show you here. For this. You know, so we talked about saving it. We can go ahead and save it. If everything looks good, it's going to save the settings, but it's not published yet. So if I close out of this, and look at this, I've got two here, but none of them are published. I can see if they're published or not, and then I say, you know what, I like this one. I'm going to go ahead and publish it, and you can do that. Then you can put a comment on it, just like on the form. You can do a comment on your publishing. And then ultimately you can see version history. So until you save it, you can import, and I'll show you that in just a minute. Once you save your action and or publish it, you'll come up with a version history button right here, and you can see who modified that action and when was that modified. So if you're having issues or questions down the road, you can see that and then revert back to previous versions if you need to, or even delete out previous versions. Just the same as what you can do with NITRO forms. So I'll just jump back a second here and show you when you do a new custom action on the list. You have an import feature here. So that's kind of similar to what we had before. We can have that you know, available to choose the import file and bring it in. Now, of course, it should be the same type of export as you're importing into. So if you can't at this point, and probably just because of the way conditions are being done, you may not be able to ever really get the legacy ones mapped into the designer ones, and you have to go and create it from scratch. But that's okay, because that actually might give you a chance to improve on that action and maybe you know, give some insight as to how you can better design your action flow when you're recreating it from a legacy mode to a designer mode. You can see a kind of an example of that is this approval process we have over here in our approval program itself. I went and took our legacy flow and mapped in here. And one of the really nice things about having the legacy flow already available is that you can go and copy things over from your previous setup. So let's say we go into this one here. Actually, this gateway had a lot of conditions around it. But since I had the legacy flow, I already had this condition set up. I just copied and pasted that information in, so I didn't have to recreate it. So that's kind of a trick to get from the legacy mode to designer mode, is just pop them up side by side and copy and paste your information over from one to the other, especially if you already have things like this set up with query list actions and references and things like that. You can easily copy that stuff over. And then what we had before in the legacy version, if we look at the legacy version of this one, let me go into here, custom actions. You can see submit for approval. This is the one I was recreating. So if you look at this flow, you can look at the conditions for each one, but if you look at this one for approval process normal flow, we had a condition for status not equal sent back. And this one for status equal sent back. Well, it's either sent back or it's not. So why have two different condition nodes there? When I designed it on the legacy node, I just went with one gateway here that said, is it sent back? If it's not equal, go ahead to the match flow. If it is equal to sent back, then go down the other route. So and kind of combine that into one condition node instead of having multiple condition evaluations in one workflow. You can have, or one flow, you can have it in one gateway and map which way it goes. So you can see here, this is that kind of cascading conditions. We're going to check this condition here. If it's matched, we're going to run this and then check and then do one of these flows. If it's not matched, we're just going directly to this gateway and run one of these flows. So those are kind of two kind of examples of what you can do with the custom action designer. There's quite a lot. You can take it a lot further with different nodes, different routes. You can take it, go down to multiple end paths of that flow. So it's really gives you a great way to design out and see what your action is doing, how it's going through the process. A couple other notes. I had a thread, I lost it. Sorry. But yeah, a couple other notes on this. It's once you publish it, it's good to go. You'll have it available wherever you need it. You can always come back in and make edits to it as you go along. Oh yeah, that's what I was going to say. So this, and I saw a question pop up, and I think it was answered, but I'll mention it for everyone. This process, this whole flow, is right there now for custom actions. We are actively and aggressively making this available for workflow designer. We're going to have a workflow designer as well. So again, right now it's released just for custom actions at the moment, and then we're going to release it for workflow, for NITRO workflows, maybe closer towards the end of the year. And in that case, when you have that, you're going to have the capability of having multiple start nodes, because you have workflow that kicks off when the item's created, when the item's modified, and in the same flow, we could have maybe two different start nodes for when it's items modified or when the item's created. We can run the same kind of flow. So that's the kind of advantage you're going to get in the workflow designer. The other thing down the line that we're going to add into these types of things is this gives us a framework to really extend what you can do with these types of flows and give the full business process notation with for each loops, do while loops, if then else conditions, things like that we're going to be adding in. So look for more and more features to be added as we get this, as we get the workflow designer released and start adding on other features to this. We're going to make it much more capable. So, we come back this time next year, it's going to be a lot more fully functional with a lot of other features and bells and whistles. But, this is out there now. This is what you have. And I think with that, we can go answer some questions that
James, let me pop in here, James. A couple things. Excellent presentation and amazing to see what you can do with this tool and where we're going to go with it and make it even more practical. And any feedback we get, we'll certainly appreciate usage. Now, one thing I want to point out, this is totally included in NITRO Studio. There's no extra cost. It isn't like, oh, now you have to pay an extra cost to get this. No, it's part of the new NITRO Studio regular upgrades. It's version 2.0 or above. It's for anybody online. It's available right now. Just got to update the site. You have to update each site that uses this to get to the 2.0 version if you haven't already. What about on-premises, James? I wasn't 100% clear on that.
Oh yeah,
On-premises.
yeah. So we have the version, all version 2.0 on premises and online has this available. So the latest package for on premises is 2.0.0.5. I think we're going to be releasing another one next week for 2.0.0.7 or 8 probably. And that anything with the 2 in front of that version number is going to be have this designer in it. Now, if I show you that over here in the Nitro Apps page, we have the the status of it in admin home. You can see the status. So whether on-prem or online, you should be able to see this. You see this site over here, or some of these other sites we have don't have the don't have 2.0, but these will not. This version will not have the designer, but this one will. Anything with the 2 in front of it is going to have the designer capability in it. So if you don't have that yet for on-premises, like I said, let me know. We'll get you the most recent package, which I know for on-prem was released on August 10th, I believe. And like I said, we should be releasing another one next week. So if you want to wait for the latest package, that's fine too. Give it another week. We'll have another package for the on-prem world. But anything with 2.0 and higher is going to have this in there for both on-premises and Office 365. Okay, great. Any questions that we didn't get to?
Well, I just want to point out this also works in the GCC version of Office 365 as well.
Okay.
No
Yep,
one
that's
asked
right.
that question. No one asked that question, but I want to make that point. And
Yeah.
that's a side note on that is we're coming out with a version for the GCC High. That's really for people who are in defense and military type operations. But just a side note. But we've always been NITRO Studio has worked for quite some time in the GCC High. So anything that works, in the commercial Office 365 also works in the GCC. And this tool will also, not Custom Action Designer, works for that. Hey, one thing, if you go back to the main screen, I want to point something out here, James, of the custom actions. I think,
Over here?
yeah, the
Anyone?
base screen, the main screen.
Oh, okay. Yeah, close out of this.
Yeah.
Let's see my settings here.
The other point is this is kind of a lot of fun to work with. It's, move it around, it's very visual. It's get very creative. But I want to point out that you can also move where it says list name. You can group these differently than just list name. See, that's a header. You can group what's under it by different experience, by different,
Yep.
by the different, whether it's published or not.
Yeah.
I mean, you're getting a lot of levels there, but you get the point. Right?
Yeah, I definitely don't need that many levels, but yeah, that's it. You can see all your designer flows and all
Yeah.
your legacy flows and kind of see what they are in there.
Right, and then you could see the buttons to edit, delete, import, or I guess export, and then debug.
Yeah, that's right. The exporters over here, and this is that we're going to be updating this icon. This is the same as it's trace
Debug.
execution legacy, but it's the same debugger that you're going to have for within the designer itself. So that this will bring up the same kind of interface as what you had in the other one. This one doesn't have any items, but that's okay. I can come back over here and kind of show that.
Oh yeah, for
And
workflows. Yeah, Jerry was asking about if they group them by the Nitro workflows can be grouped like that also. And that's
yep.
yeah, we already have that available right now in Nitro Studio apps workflows.
Yeah. Let me show you that real quick. It's the same thing, and then and then of course it'll be there for the workflow designer too. You'll have that
Right, right. That's kind of a
ability to
side
kind of
question,
group.
but it's
Oh,
there.
side quite. Yeah. Let's get into though. But maybe some
But
people on the call don't know this. We have the same thing. It's you can drag and drop up to the top there,
column headers, right?
column headers, and see what and group them by that. So you can group things by list name, group things by event type, whatever you need to do. You can just drag and drop those guys up there, and there's also a search option up here if you ever get lost with the number of workflows you have. And we're going to have the same kind of functions available for the action designer as well. You can see it's right here. We got the search function. It's kind of like they're two sides of the same coin. I always like to say in my training sessions, it's just how you kick it off. One's manually invoked, which is a custom action, and one's looking for something to happen, which is a workflow. But we try to, they're kind of doing similar things with adding items, updating items. So we're going to have a lot of that same parity and with it. So I think just quickly from a technical standpoint, the custom actions are a little easier to get to this point with the designer workflow design, the designer interface, but the workflows are going to take a little more time.
Yeah, it's a programming thing. But the other thing that I found interesting, I had a bunch of legacy on one of my lists, legacy custom actions. So I went
Mhm.
ahead and created the designer ones and even published them. The next step is to go to the Nitro form or the buttons and then connect it. So you can have two of the same. You can have a designer and legacy, and right now the button's using legacy. Then you go back to your forms and change the button over to using the designer one.
Mhm.
So you can keep both in parallel. It's the same like an approval process that you set up. I had it going in legacy. I recreated it in designer. I left the one in legacy. When I was ready, I went to the Nitro form to reorient to put the new designer custom action behind the button. Because these custom actions don't do anything until a button clicks it off, right, James? I mean, you have to
Right.
do something to make it run, unless,
Right.
so.
Yep. Yeah. So a couple questions on that. Moving from legacy, they're just coming into the questions box. And I know that's going to be the biggest question on everyone's minds. Like,
Yeah.
how do I convert them from legacy to designer? And again, the story there, unfortunately, is that because the way we broke out the conditions into the gateway rather than in the action itself, there isn't a way to directly convert the legacy to designer without you have to kind of manually go through and do it. But like I said, it gives you a chance to really, you know, audit your flow and make sure it's working the way you want it to work, or you can see where you might have,
Well,
doubling up on something, and
that's
it gives
true,
you a way
James,
to
but
design it better.
it's still a bit of work, and I can understand
Yeah, it is.
the reason why people are asking that question. But you made a good point: is that all the logic of the individual actions themselves is already configured, like you said, all the placeholders and everything else that's in there, the mail templates and all that is already configured. So I
Yeah,
found
so
it
like
not a heavy lift. Honestly, it looked bad at first. I thought I'm gonna have to recreate, but it's not a heavy lift at all because it's actually, oh, I just slide this over, plop it over as you're calling it, and I'm able
yeah,
to say, okay, I just line them up on two screens and say this action is this. It's
yeah,
just copy and paste, really. It doesn't
yeah, like
take
something
that
like,
long.
yeah, like this condition here, just copy that.
Yeah, it looks
And
hairy, but it really isn't hard.
no,
And anybody who wants any assistance will be glad to help. It's just part
yeah.
of our support to, if you get stuck on some point on that.
And you just made a good point about the mail templates, because the mail templates are actually stored sort of separately from the custom
In
actions,
the
so they
list,
will be.
yeah.
So all the mail templates you created for legacy flows will be available there for the designer flows without having to recreate them. So that is one thing you will not have to recreate, is the mail templates.
Right. It's essentially the same thing with a different interface, but of course, a much more, like you said earlier, James, it's going to have a lot of flexibility already, but we're going to add a lot more to really build up. And as I said in one of the answers, Nintex better watch out or coming for you.
That's right. That's right. So yeah, so all you guys are, on the ground floor here with Nitro, and get like Scott was saying, you get this. This is part of what an update. You pay your subscription, you get this. This is not something you're gonna have to pay extra for. So
Yeah.
lucky you.
We'd love to hear
um,
feedback on anyone who gives us, who tries it out and thinks it needs some kind of change or some kind of additional feature, additional
yep.
functionality. We're always open for hearing that because that's what we do. We have to respond to what you need and put it in there to grow Nitro. Okay.
Yep. Yep. And I just got a question about stability of it. Well, we backward test everything, hammer on it as much as we can. And yeah, every new update for Nitro is going to be working in the newer, you know,
Yeah,
um, anything you've already created will not be impacted by updating to a newer version of Nitro.
that's true. We did a lot of QA on this. This has been something we've been hammering on all summer before we released it. But like any software, you can't always know every bug or every possible permutation of the situation. So can't guarantee anything that's perfectly going to work. There might be something you find where you do but we haven't found anything that you know of significance at this point that we haven't fixed.
Right. Yeah, maybe minor tweaks here and there, but yeah, all the functionality is all there, so it'll work.
Yeah,
It'll
I
work in
think it's
full.
pretty stable from what we've sseen.
Yep. Yeah.
And the
So
other thing, I don't know if this is clear, you can keep using legacy ones if you wish. You can do a mix. It doesn't matter. You can have both running at the same time, legacy and designer. It doesn't have to, you have to suddenly convert to designer tomorrow. You
that's
can,
exactly
if you
right. Like,
prefer legacy, use legacy, whatever.
yeah, exactly. Maybe for simpler workflows, it just makes sense to do legacy. You can see here we have the designer flow and the legacy flow, and Yeah, I like, going back to our point about the conversion. I mean, I set this one up side by side and had it done in like 10 minutes. So
Yeah.
it was really like, in 10 minutes time, it's number of flows. I can understand it's going to take some time, but that's, it's not that hard.
It was much easier than I thought when I was doing it, because this part of the testing, we were going through that, and it really was. I thought it'd be a little, somewhat harder, but it really wasn't hard at all. It's just boom, 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 boom.
Yeah, and
And,
we did get a question on like if it would fail or not if we use the if we did import. So let me actually try that, because that's a good question. I haven't tried that yet. So I've got a legacy custom action, and I'm going to do a designer custom action and see what happens. Just give it a
what are you
try.
trying to
It's
do?
probably,
Import in legacy ones?
yeah, it's probably going to fail, but I just want to see what it's going to do.
Yeah. The XML, right? Let's choose the file.
Yeah, it's just taking a moment to come up.
Download.
Like there it is. Okay. Yeah. Right. So it's not going to read it because the legacy and the designer are totally different. So there's the answer. That's your answer, Matt. It's not going. It's going to fail entirely. So, custom action singer.
Document the custom.
Yeah.
That's a good one. And that may be something we want to add, James, more to it. Like, I mean, of course, you can take a photo, a screenshot, but that doesn't tell you what's going on inside each individual action.
Yeah. And the other way you can do that, like I just showed, you can export it out and save it. It'll save it as an XML file, and that's kind of a way you can audit. But I guess you have to have the designer to, or
Well, right.
NITRO to read it.
That
So to
wouldn't
say.
go in Word, Visio, or PDF for sure. But
No.
good suggestion. That's the kind of suggestions we like. And I think that would be a good, see if we can
Yeah.
put that in some way or other, and that makes sense when a person reads it. Because sometimes people like in administrative or manager, they like to have that as a backup. I
Mhm.
understand that. Okay, let's put that on the list, James.
Yeah, and that's absolutely the kind of thing we're going to be adding in as we go along here, is the ability to do things like that, export out into different ways, document it in other ways, and as we get those types of questions and those feature suggestions, we're definitely going to be looking to add that stuff in for sure.
Okay.
All right,
Good
any other
job.
questions that we haven't answered here that were on the? I've got a ton of questions coming in, which is great.
How about PDF to design? Yeah, maybe we can talk to you about that, Anita. What that PDF to design? Yeah, that's a good
Yeah,
idea. Well,
it is.
I'll tell you something else. This comes derived from BPMN, which is Business Process Management Notation 2.0, which is a standard across the industry. And there are ways to get BPMN into a format that can be read by other BPMN BPMN 2.0 tools. So this is going to be cross-functional in some ways. We haven't, want to say where we're going with that yet, but that's what the intention is here, to make this layout, the Visio style layout, the BPMN style layout, which is common to this kind of tool, available. So hopefully at some point you'll be able to do something in Visio and then import it into this tool.
Ultimately, yeah.
That's
We want to get there.
a few versions down, but that's what we want to do. Because if we read the XML exported by the BPMN tool, then we just have to translate it to what we're doing here in either probably more likely the NITRO workflows than the custom actions, but one way or the other. So that's where we're going. A bit of a heavy lift there, a bit of a road to get through that, but that's a possibility to work that way. Do it in Visio or other BPMN tool, and then import it in and have it established as a design in the designer. But we don't know. That's still preliminary, and we don't want to say anything promising on that yet.
Right.
First was to
That's
get
it.
this out, right?
Yeah, exactly. And it's just one of the things. There was a question. I think I answered it, but about if you have two different conditions. I think I answered that with the multiple gateways. But I just want to ask that individual. I think it was Jerry. If you have we answered your question? If not, let us know. We can follow up with you on that about the multiple conditions. I just want to see if he pops a question in there.
Yeah.
All right. Well, I'll wait for that.
We can talk to him individually too. Yeah.
Exactly. So the other thing, just kind of, housekeeping on the other side of this. Thank you for joining. Appreciate everyone's time. But I want to point out a few upcoming things we got. We got some upcoming workshops for this one we're doing right now, the new custom action designer. But we're going to talk. The next one's going to be talking about using web services. So something you may not have used much. We're going to talk more about that. We're going to talk about bots later on in October. And then we have, right now we can't really do for each loops, but I'll show you kind of a hack around that, so you can actually kind of do a for each loop in Actions. But like I mentioned, we'll have that directly supported in our tool eventually, but I'll show you a hack around that when we get into November. And then, okay. And then for webinars, we have some webinars coming up about InfoPath replacement, the visual. We're going to kind of redo this, what we did today. I know it says workflow, but it's really a custom action designer, I think, that we're going to be talking about in September, kind of for the broader audience outside of,
I don't know. We may change that though. We may make the Teams one that date. So just watch the website if there's changes. But anybody, I think any of our customers aren't on InfoPath. But if you have any of your friends that you know aren't still on InfoPath, any of your colleagues out there, we're really pushing to get everybody moved from InfoPath to NITRO Studio. We're in the wonders and pleasures of using NITRO Studio, right? Instead of outdated InfoPath stuff. It's funny, people are just dragging their heels on it, but some are moving quickly, some are moving slowly, and we're here to help them.
And I just saw another question pop in from Matt there. So the question is about Azure Functions. We actually have a separate function. We'll talk about it in that webinar about web services too, but we actually have a separate Azure function invocation. So that is there for you today, Matt. With the web services, we actually do have a direct Azure function invocation. But yeah, okay. So that was it. Just one other thing, the help site and the forum. Make sure you join up there if you haven't already, and participate in conversations. I don't know what's going on with that link. I don't know why I did that, but there we go. Just refreshing, we got it back. So, all right. Final things there. I think we're good. We pretty much close out the hour. So I appreciate everyone's time today. If you have any follow-up questions or something that pops into your mind, feel free to send us an email and we'll get it answered. But again, appreciate everyone being on this call today, and hope you have a great rest of your day.
Yeah, thank you, James. Great presentation, really good, very thorough.
Thanks.
Okay, bye.